Hello everyone, welcome to our bonus episode of... Which episode is this?
419.
Of Coronation Street. I'm Gemma.
I'm Michael.
And today we're talking about episodes of Coronation Street broadcast between 1970 and 1974.
Not all of them. I mean,
No.
I think it's going to be a lengthy discussion, but can't cover everything. If you've been listening to the other episodes in this series, we have earlier on this year purchased some of the old DVDs that were released back in the early 2000s, featuring 80 of the best or cherry-picked episodes of Coronation Street per decade. And we've already discussed the episodes from the 1960s at length, and finally we have reached the end of 1974, which means that we can chat about the first half of the 1970s decade, which was definitely, prior to watching this, a bit of a mystery to us, a bit of a blank spot in our Corrie knowledge, particularly. I mean, we'd read about it obviously, and we'd had quiz questions in the podcast about it, and we'd looked on and we'd done character profiles about it, but can't say that we'd actually watched very much of it or seen very much clips of it. So I was looking forward to finding out, what it was actually like.
Yeah.
How, just before we get started, how would you describe, how's your journey through the Coronation Street annals going? Are you enjoying it? Are you finding it enlightening?
I'm still enjoying it. I'm finding it not as fun as it was before. I think partly because some of my favourite characters aren't in it so much in the 70s or at all.
Like?
Well, Elsie's gone. Ina's not around very much. Irma's gone. Like this, as we get further into the 70s, they disappear more and more. And,
I mean, Ina...
The early 70s all had all those characters in, but...
Ina was in it. It feels like there hasn't been as many episodes based around some of those characters. I mean, Ina did have 1974. She was only in 13, 14 episodes, I think I saw today of that episode, because Violet Carson had health problems during that year, and obviously Elsie has gone. She got married, but I would still say in the time that she was in it, Elsie was a fairly significant character,
definitely.
And we've got her return to look forward to as well in the second half of the 70s, so we don't have to wait too much longer before we see her again.
Feels like it's modernising every year and moving further away from how quaint and small the world felt.
Yeah, no, I said
60s.
that in the end of the 60s, didn't I? And you weren't feeling it as much as I was then, but definitely it doesn't feel... I think quaint is a really good word to describe it. It doesn't feel like the intimate stage show featuring the lives of this narrow band of characters as it once was. It really has spread out. It's opened up.
Yeah.
It's become more, realistic. We've all got these multiple connections from outside our own street, but
it's also the stories are unfolding over longer periods of time. I
think there's fewer kind of one-off episodes than there were, and maybe it's, I mean, we're making broad generalizations. We've seen 40 episodes in the 1970s so far out of the, how many was there been? 100 episodes per year, so 500 episodes. We can only base it on what we've seen, but it's not feeling as good. But I'm still very much enjoying it, and I don't regret 1 second watching it. I think that to be able to watch it firsthand and see these characters as they were back in the 70s, see the introductions of some people who went on to be massive names on Coronation Street, and even just putting a face to certain names that we've banded about on the podcast so much from our research on Corriepedia and all the books and everything over the past 8 years. It's been so valuable to us as Coronation Street podcasters that really should have done this before. But as it is the 60th anniversary of Coronation Street this year, I do feel it's a good excuse. It's very fitting that we do this year.
think it's also becoming a bit more frustrating to watch as well, because it's harder to follow, because there are fewer episodes out of the year that we can actually watch, because obviously as the years go on, more episodes get added. So 40 episodes out of 100 is a much more significant number than 40 episodes out of 500,
Yeah.
So it's, and the more characters get added as well, it's more difficult to follow. And some sort of characters have been introduced and left without really so much as a fanfare or any interest from me about who they are and what the heck's going on.
It certainly felt to me that the first half of the 70s has included some some characters that they tried to test out, but then they didn't work, so they're gone again.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking the likes of the Flemings, who we did mention in the 1960s, didn't they? Because they had first appeared on the street in 69, but they were gone by, I don't know whether it was 1970 or 1971, and they totally didn't work for me. And I'm now going to look back at those characters as like, that was a bit of a waste of time. Why did they even bother? But I mean, maybe it was just to do with the choice of episodes that they were in.
Yeah, I know,
but I can barely remember them now, and it was a month and a half ago that we were watching their episodes, but they really didn't leave much of an impression.
No.
The other ones that I put in the same category as them are Elsie's, was it her nephew and niece that came in for a little bit in the beginning of the 70s? And again, we only must have seen 2 or 3 episodes with them in. The nephew had like glasses and...
Oh yeah, he was a nerd, wasn't he?
Yeah, and... It just left absolutely...
Everyone knows that only nerds wear glasses.
Absolutely no impression.
Glasses.
But I mean, we're feeling... I don't want to start this on a negative note, but...
No. We have to talk about how things are changing, and I think that... I think it's fair to say that those things... We've also changed the way we've watched it a little bit, haven't we?
Yes. Because... But with the kind of expansion of the world of Coronation Street and the expanded cast list and everything like this,
and the number of episodes we haven't been able to watch,
and the number of storylines that are going on, what we've found to be incredibly useful is before watching each episode, we've gone onto Corriepedia and read the synopsis of the preceding episode, so at least we know what's coming up to it. And we only started doing this maybe 1971-ish, because we were going through those 1970 episodes, and quite a substantial amount of the time of the episode we were going, what's going on here? Sometimes who's that? Why they're doing this? What's the motivation? And that's certainly been something that has been very worthwhile, and something that we need to carry on. And if anyone else is joining us in watching these old episodes on the DVD, if anyone else has picked them up, I would certainly recommend just spending a bit of time reading what happened in the episode before, because
it can really give you a lot of context. Even if some things that they mention are still mysterious. Oh
yeah, definitely. Even doing this, we've been a bit baffled by some things that are going on, and you'll read like the synopses on Corriepedia, and it'll mention these character names, and we'll go, who is that? I don't know who they're talking about. But this is the thing, we couldn't possibly watch all the episodes. They're not available, for one thing. We're just watching the episodes that ITV DVD have deemed to be the significant and the best of the 1970s, and which does, similar to the 1960s, include pretty much every wedding, every time they decide to put on some sort of play, every time they go off on a little jolly somewhere.
Definitely. One thing I will criticise about the DVDs, I wish they have a synopsis for each episode, but often they're full of spoilers and they tell you what happens in the episode, which isn't very helpful, because once you've seen it, you know that information. What information would be useful is the context of what and why it was selected. I would love to have a booklet to go with this DVD of whoever selected these episodes, just them writing down, this episode I selected because this is the first time you'll notice that so-and-so wrote a script, or this is significant because this was Violet Carson's blah blah blah, something that indicates to me the historical importance of the episode. So oftentimes it is apparent why it was picked, and other times we'll watch the episode and we'll be baffled as to why this was picked over something else.
And I've noticed that much more in these 1970 ones than I did in the 60s. There have been more episodes where we've ended it going,
why was that on it?
Yeah, why did they show that?
The reason why a lot of these episodes don't work particularly well is because there's we're not watching it in a continuous stream.
In the context.
I would probably enjoy watching all these episodes if I was watching them one after the other and I could see what's going on. But when they're just taken, it sounds like a preposterous concept to take episodes individually that are part of a soap and to analyse them and watch them as one-offs, because they're not meant to be consumed in that way, are they?
No, but interestingly, in the 60s, they had a few more examples where they would pick 2 episodes in a row and put those on the disc, and I don't feel that they've done that as much here. So we've literally been one-offs.
Maybe that didn't happen as much in the 70s.
I don't know.
Again, we can only go by It's like being an archaeologist of Coronation Street.
Oh, no, totally. What has been really, really useful, though, and I can't thank them enough for doing this, the guys over at Corriepedia sent us a message back after we did the 1960s episodes with some suggestions of episodes to catch up on YouTube that weren't on the DVD.
Yeah, they're so nice and helpful.
Because apparently, I think it was David that was talking to us, was saying that the 70s DVD in particular is notorious for not necessarily having the best choice of episodes on. So it's not just us that's being a little bit down on it, and there's certainly an awful lot to like on them, which we'll get to.
Oh yeah, still some.
But David said you need to watch these as well, and I'm so glad that we did, because some of my favourite things to watch were what was on YouTube. But then maybe some of that was because it was a series of episodes. I mean, if I just... We've got lots of other background context to get to first, but by far my favourite experience, and it's like so far ahead in my enjoyment factor compared to anything else that was on this DVD, was the Joe Denali Saga.
Oh yeah, I thought you were going to say something else.
That was bloody brilliant.
Was that all YouTube?
That was all... That I think there was one episode that was on the DVD which ended in Joe Donneli. Now, if you remember, he was the guy who was an ex-army mate of Steve Tanner's, and he had killed Steve Tanner. And
unbeknownst to everybody.
And like in a year before, the 2 years before, I can't remember. And in this series of episodes in late 1970, it was revealed what he'd done. And there was a DVD episode where he's back over in Coronation Street. There was an awful lot of American soldiers visiting Coronation Street during these early days, wasn't there? But anyway, he seduces Irma Ogden, takes her back to the flat and gets very drunk and leery with her before confessing to her that he'd murdered Steve.
Can I just interject here? The guy who played Joe Donneli, I don't have his name, he was very compelling and charismatic.
He was brilliant.
And he also did the voice for...
He was one of the Thunderbirds, wasn't he?
He was really good.
He only died, like, was it last year or the year before or something? It was very, very recently.
He filled the screen up.
Yeah. Now we then watched the next 3 or 4 episodes, which are all available on YouTube, and as a set, they were brilliant. And they're exactly what I like about Coronation Street. You know, the high drama. It was a little bit sensational. It was dark. There was a villain. It was
your favourites were being menaced.
My favourite, exactly, because we love Irma. Yeah. And we had to say goodbye to her not long after this either, like a year or so after. But basically, I think, don't the other residents of the street kind of work out what's going on there? They decide to have a party in the Rovers, don't they, to
distract?
Because Joe goes over to the Rovers, and the regulars put on some sort of party to make it look like they haven't cottoned on to what he's doing or something. I can't even remember.
He keeps leaving Irma in the room,
that's right.
and coming back out. It wasn't like he was just standing over her the whole time.
Yeah. And then so he then.
So he realises
that they're onto him. So he then does a bunk out of the Rover's toilet window, and then goes to Minnie Caldwell's house, another real favourite character of ours. So it's bad enough having Irma Ogden sort of being held hostage, but now he's got this lovely old lady.
Not just Minnie, he also has Bobby.
And Bobby the cat, and then
he also Stan goes in to try to rescue them.
That Stan scene.
And I tell you what,
that was a real turning point for Stan Ogden. He was a hero.
Yeah, he was. That was a really interesting way to add depth to that character, who had been a buffoonish kind of bumbling idiot.
Yeah.
Like selflessly throwing himself into mortal peril.
Yeah, because of the way that this guy had taken his daughter hostage.
Yeah.
And he was there. It was chilling that Joe Donnelly's there with his gun pointed at. Did he have it pointed at Stan, and then he made them sing Silent Night together?
Yeah.
Because this is all happening around Christmas time. Before then, Joe turns the gun on himself, and we don't see this, but we hear the bang, and everyone's outside at this point, and then it's just silent, and Stan walks out of Minnie's house, having just seen this guy kill himself in front of him.
You think he'd have PTSD, but that wasn't an issue back in the day.
It was
it was really powerful,
brilliant. It was, it made me kind of feel the same things as I did during the height of the Phelan saga. It was so good, just a little pocket of brilliance,
concentrated drama,
and I think honestly, this was the black and whiteness of it helped, because in 1969 we'd seen Corrie's first few colour episodes, and then that carried on throughout a lot of 1970, and then partway through 1970 they had the colour strike, when the people who were filming it said this is too expensive, too much work.
Don't bother with that. Can't be bothered.
So Coronation Street went back into black and white for a little bit, and it so helped the gritty, depressing. It was like a film noir-ish feel to this particular storyline. It complemented it so well.
It really did, yeah, because it, all the film noir kind of effect and
the fact that it was this it had a load of Americans help the film noir as well. It was one of my favourite things about watching these old Coronation Streets with this saga. And if Corriepedia hadn't told us about them, we'd have seen that first episode on the DVD, and then it would have passed us by. So honestly, I implore anyone who likes the dark villainy, on the intense, on the edge of your seat stuff to check this out on YouTube. It is really worth it, and as I say, it makes you look at Stan in a different way, because he was just the comic relief up until that point, but he really came into his own in those final scenes. And interestingly as well, this script was the second draft of one, because they apparently they did one draft of this script and it was rubbish, and so they had to bring back an old writer, and I can't remember who it was, who had retired, to try and fix this scene, this episode, because they knew that this was going to be a big episode, and the script had to be just right, and it was really, really was. It was brilliant. It's absolutely fantastic. And the other one, just as while we're on the sort of talking about some of the YouTube episodes that we watched, the Gypsy Saga, which came just before that.
That was that was just interesting, because it was a sort of an issues storyline where everybody, but unlike modern Corrie, which I feel issues storylines are generally to teach you about something, and you experience a character going through an issue with them by their side and kind of have the same emotional impact. This was a sort of issue storyline where different people took different approaches and opinions on things, and it was about gypsies, and
they'd all rocked up on.
I just need to say that there is a contention about the word gypsy and whether that is a slur, and if you're allowed to say gypsy or not.
Well, it was interesting.
Gypsy is the word that they use to describe themselves, and I can't. Now's not the time to get into.
But there was no filter on what some of the characters were saying about them as well. Some of the things that the characters who were anti-gypsies were saying, I was like, you couldn't have them saying that on Coronation Street now, even though
they describe themselves in the show as gypsies, and some people who are gypsies use that word to describe themselves. So that's the word I'm using out of respect for them, to use the word that they use for themselves. To let them define themselves, so they call themselves gypsies. So, So some people were basically saying these are all a bunch of scum. I don't want them anywhere near me. They can't come in. Like I think Annie didn't want them in the pub. Hilda had one round for tea, and she was aghast to realise.
Yeah, she was way against them, wasn't she? But Stan makes friends with one because he's got the same shirt as him, didn't he? Right, and then he invited him round for tea, and he didn't tell Hilda that this guy's one of the gypsies, and Hilda thinks he's great, and then she's aghast when she realises she's been entertaining a gypsy one evening. And Hilda's a lovable character, but she's obviously, now looking back at it from a 2020 point of view, she was taking the wrong, in inverted commas, stance against them.
I think it was probably progressive at the time, because Lucille was the character who really championed them and she disappeared overnight because she wanted to teach the children how to read and things. And I mean, the show humanised them to a certain extent, but they were definitely the outsiders, weren't they? And kind of the oppressed ones who I mean, Len, who I think, no, it was Ray, and maybe it was Len as well. A lot of the men went to the gypsy encampment and basically destroyed it and fought with them because they didn't want them to be around their way. And obviously this conflict has been not unchanged really until present day with people.
I found Ina's attitude interesting towards them, because she didn't really see the problem with them and thought live and let live. She was
trying to get them a doctor. This was also pretty interesting, because there was a little child that was sick, and they were trying to get medicine for it. I can't remember if it was a boy or a girl. And Ina was like, this child needs a doctor. You don't bugger around buying medicine from the corner shop. You have to get a doctor. And the gypsies were saying, we can't get a doctor. There's no point even trying. And Ina was like, nonsense. So she phones up to try and get a doctor out. And then she realises that what they're saying is true. And they can't actually get anybody to go out there because the doctors won't go because they're gypsies.
Yeah.
And I thought I don't think they dwelt on that very much. But I thought that was a really powerful and progressive thing to sort of say, here's Ina who thinks she's salt of the earth and down, she knows everything and she's practical and down to earth. But she didn't understand the reality that they were living in.
The whole series of episodes came across as very progressive, and you think that the issues-based story are a modern day thing in Coronation Street. And yes, obviously there's a lot more issues stories these days, but I was very surprised how much it felt like a modern issues-based story just set in 1970, but also, and about something that I didn't really know anything about gypsy culture and everything.
There's a lot to delve into, and we can't. But although it felt progressive, also it was very much set at the time, so it's not wasn't very PC. But I did really
and I wonder why that's
powerful.
Why they didn't put it on the DVDs.
Yeah, but I think it was really powerful actually to watch characters talking flippantly and casually about this group of people and sort of tarnishing them all with the same brush and saying, they're thieves and criminals, and the gypsies trying to just get on with their lives and stuff, but also perhaps every so often doing the things that they had been accused of. It was a much more complex take on a situation than Corrie would ever do now, because they wouldn't dare to have characters be racist in that same way.
No.
Like we just spoke about with the Bailey storyline and having
none of the main characters that you're supposed to like.
Yeah, because obviously back in the day people would have thought that that's the way you should act around people, but yeah, I just thought it was really powerful and like a kind of time capsule of a way that they approach the story that is very much set in that moment and could not be repeated now.
Speaking of time capsules, I'm kind of interested to hear about what you thought about what do we learn about life in the 70s? What did you think about the 70s style, the 70s fashion, 70s
I thought it was great.
Houses?
Like it you could tell that people were becoming more socially mobile, and more luxury goods were being purchased. Houses were starting to look a bit more like modern houses, although everyone still has a sideboard, which I don't think many people have these days.
A lot of the sets is definitely looking reminiscent of what the houses look like nowadays as well, don't they? You can say, that's where Kabin lives now. That's where the Baileys are now. Speaking of buying purchases, they had that funny story with Hilda and Stan and the colour TV, didn't they? Which they then had to get rid of quickly out.
Colour TV. And she was going,
can you take it out the back so nobody knows?
That was really sweet, because the guy came to repossess the TV, and Hilda and Stan were quite philosophical about the fact that it had to be taken away. But Hilda was just like, just spare me the embarrassment of taking it out the front, and the man who was taking it away was like, fair enough, love, and he sort of cheerfully took it away. And it was just like they all acknowledged that this was just how their lives were, because they couldn't afford this thing that they'd purchased. I
have to say that the Ogdens were still far and away some of the best characters, and the episodes that revolved around antics, for lack of a better word, that the Ogdens got up to were among my favourites. And whenever an episode came up that is like, this is a Stan and Hilda episode, you're in for a good time. My personal favourite being Hilda's posh party that she has. I can't remember what year that was in, but why was she even... She'd got a book, hadn't she, about how to put on a fancy dinner party, and she was kind of following it to the letter, because the Ogdens are all about trying to,
aspire.
It was all aspiring to be better than the class that they'd been born into, and Hilda trying to get her eggs in aspic.
Yeah, this was in 1973.
And she couldn't find out what aspic was, could she? And she goes to the Rovers to ask Bet, and Bet's just like, oh, I think it's
jelly.
Just yellow jelly, isn't it? And aspic is what?
Aspic is it's
like the jelly you get in your pork pies.
I think it's either savoury or it's supposed to be flavourless.
Yeah, and Hilda doesn't want to give away that she doesn't really know what it is. So when Bet says it's yellow jelly, she's like, oh yeah, of course it is. So she then goes and buys packets of lemon jelly, which she dunks her eggs in. It was hilarious, and that's the episode where she puts on her fancy wig as well, doesn't she? And she does her eyes out. She just desperately wants to.
I just loved it.
She come across as being better than she was.
Put on all these airs and graces in this sort of frozen moment in time where people might cross the threshold of the house and forget who Hilda was, and be fooled into thinking that she'd somehow become this sophisticated party animal. But she just had the time of her life. Again, it's just the innocence of her not really fully understanding what was happening and what people thought and how they saw her. Yeah. But she was just happy to believe
she's so innocent
for that period of time.
I love the bit where one of the things in the book said that she had to, when your guests arrive, you have to ask them if they want to go upstairs or something. I can't even remember what the reason behind that was. And she's just following this to the letter, and then some people come, like Minnie Caldwell comes to the door, and Stan's first thing to say is, do you want to go upstairs? And it's like he's propositioning to her, and I can't remember again what Hilda had a rote thing to say to everybody who came into the lounge. She was just repeating it again and again and again. It was so sweet. The other Hilda and Stan episode that stands out to me is the serving hatch episode. And I was like, one of the things I would say about the episodes on this disc, well, the episodes on the 60s disc compared to this one, is on the 60s one, a lot of episodes that we were coming up to, and I was going, this is the episode where such and such happens. I've heard about this episode. Whereas in the 70s, that didn't happen quite so much. I didn't start the episode and it's like, it's this one. But the serving hatch episode was one where I was like, yes, I've heard of this one. I'm looking forward to this. And it was hilarious, wasn't it? And really interestingly, some of the direction around it, because basically the story is Hilda's gone off somewhere, I can't remember where, and while she's away, Stan is installing this serving hatch between the lounge and the front room of number 13, but he's got the measurements wrong, and he ends up putting this massive serving hatch in, which is still there now, I think. And throughout the first half of the episode, all we see is, or we hear hammering coming from number 13, and then you've got the characters in the shops that are like listening in.
But Jerry and Len, I think, is it? Yeah, are mad because they're the builders and he wouldn't take their advice, and he wanted to show that he could do it.
Didn't he steal a bit of wood from their yard or something like that? And Stan is so proud of himself for constructing this clearly poorly proportioned serving hatch. But I think he was also
worried that he did it wrong. But then when Hilda saw it, she was like, "Oh, Stan, it's wonderful," and
because she thinks that this is a bit of class.
Bigger the better, really.
Exactly.
And they really can't account for why they would need a serving hatch between the dining room and...
No, that's just left there, isn't it? Because the kitchen's really the other side.
The serving hatch is there to facilitate moving food from the kitchen to the dining room. And when they get this pointed out to them, Stan's like, yeah, well, you can't put it on the kitchen wall because there's no room.
And I can't remember who it is, whether it's like Len and Ray or something that go around there and they're like, they don't know what to say, and then Hilda comes in because don't they want to see Hilda's reaction maybe?
Yeah, and then she just loves it.
Yeah, and then one of them says, "Oh, it's not a serving hatch; it's a picture frame for our Hilda." It was
it's so
really
wonderful
lovely.
That how this is the thing. Like Hilda always wants to live in this idealized version of her life where she's more affluent and everything, but actually she's pretty happy with the bits that she does get. When she gets a small taste of it, she's pretty satisfied. And that's what I really love about her. She's very content, even though she has her ambitions. Yeah,
another Hilda moment that stood out to me. Actually, I can think of two. One of them was when they were just before the opening of the Capricorn Club, I think it was, and Rita was doing some of her lounge singing. I'm sure we'll have a lot to say about Rita later. And Hilda saying, no, you want to be singing this song. This is what people like. And she goes up to the microphone and starts singing they're warbling away this jaunty little number, which is nothing at all like the smooth lounge stuff that Rita was singing. And that was great. I love any excuse for Hilda to sing. And the other one was when, I don't remember when this one was, when she has a real... Oh, it was when Stan was accused of being a peeping
this was
Tom.
Awful. This really hurt my heart.
Go on then, do you want to...
I've got to find where it is.
I can't remember where it was, but everyone on the street...
Basically, there was a mystery where some women had been peeped on, and they didn't know who was doing it, but it was in 1972, and they accused Stan of doing it, because it was sort of like a bit of a... what's it called when you confuse somebody with somebody else? Anyway, literally everybody turns against the Ogdens.
Which is also a bit of a modern Coronation Street trope where everybody suddenly turns against somebody when they're accused of something, even though they've got no reason not to believe them. And they kind of like make this posse and they go to the police. Yeah, it's like a lynch mob against Stan.
Yeah, and I think Ernest is like one of the major contributors to this, and sort of saying, well, he can't get away with this. We've got to justice and all this stuff. And I remember Stan sitting at the kitchen table, like smoking and going, right, well. Kind of being philosophical about it, like, well, I guess I'll go down the station then because I can't prove I didn't do it, but I know
it was heartbreaking.
It was so
but
sad.
Then at the climax of the episode, Hilda marches into the Rovers and gives this almighty roasting to the Walkers and everybody there who's turning against her Stan, and she's livid and she.
Yeah, she takes him to task.
Basically, then ends up spitting on the floor and says, "Stuff the lot of you" or something.
Yeah,
and that was that performance by Jean Alexander in that episode, brilliant, because the Ogdens are so often seen as being the comedy,
the butt of the joke.
Yeah, to have her leave with the upper hand for once.
Exactly, and I tell you what, one thing Jean Alexander played Hilda with was this quiet dignity inside, where she was completely true to herself and she knew who she was all the time, even though she had these aspirations. She played obviously as a comedic role. I really felt as though there was a love for the character and an integrity that made it not a cheap.
Oh yeah,
Hilda was never a cheap laugh, because there was that dignity and respect from Jean Alexander to the character.
Go on.
I just want to say about how another thing that we added into our viewing experience was to watch adverts.
Oh yeah, we did mention that. I've written that earlier in the notes, but we forgot to mention that. On the ones when we watched the YouTube episodes that Corrie suggested. Go on.
I have a fondness and love for vintage adverts and magazines and ephemera of the time. So we decided to, every so often, just bob on some adverts from the era. And you can find them really easily just by searching on YouTube,
1972 UK adverts.
And just watch how much fun. And it really gives it a bit of a context. And
yeah, it was really, really fun to do that. We did it when the advert break came on, didn't we? It was because when we were watching the YouTube episodes, we got to the advert, like, right, let's pause this, let's watch some adverts from the time, and it was so funny.
It really, you learn so much, honestly. That's why I like things like that.
Yeah, and I particularly enjoyed it when the Our Whites Lemonade advert came up, because that is a classic UK advert. Our Whites Lemonade.
There's so many good jingles.
Yeah, he reminded me of Ernest Bishop, the secret lemonade drinker. Yeah. And I enjoyed Ernest Bishop. I wouldn't say that I'm leaving, the 60s and 70s with him being my favourite character or anything, but I didn't really have any idea what he was like before I started this rewatch, because literally all I'd seen of him was getting shot.
Yeah,
sorry, spoiler alert for the second half of the 70s.
Oh.
But he was, he's a decent chap, wasn't he?
The word that came to my mind.
Not a total nerd, which is what he looks like, because he wears glasses, and I know that's terrible to think.
But no,
and he's a photographer.
Yeah, but costuming is a way of signalling what a shorthand for what the personality of the character is, isn't it?
Yeah, and I found him a really great match for Emily. Emily, again, shone in these episodes.
Oh, there were some really funny bits.
I do kind of miss her being the quiet, mousy, wouldn't say boo to a goose. No, was that the word?
Yeah.
Is that what you say, boo to?
Yeah, not a ghost,
single
it's a goose.
person under the thumb of Leonard Swindley, because Leonard is obviously gone by this point.
Yeah.
She's grown a pair a little bit more in this, hasn't she? But again, a few scenes showing what a fantastic comedic actress Eileen Derbyshire was, and if you only saw her as, you know, old Emily, Auntie Emily, you'd have no idea what rich comedic material she provided in some Coronation Street.
I know,
scenes.
it's like once a year they will make a comedy scene for her to perform in, and I can't find where it was, but it was
one of them was the community centre Summer Fete in 1971. And that was quite, I like that, because that was a standalone episode that wasn't a play or a holiday off somewhere or drama, tragedy.
I'll tell you what it was. It was because it was a community event, and it was logically included every one of the characters because it was a community event.
Yeah.
And they could still do this now because the community summer fates exist.
Yeah.
I know they're very quaint and villagey, but you know, city people can also have community fates if they want to.
So that had some more funny Stan and Hilda stuff, actually, didn't it? Because hadn't Stan stolen some flowers from the Red Wreck and then was entering them in the competition?
The way that the fate, it was like a produce competition sort of thing. So people were growing vegetables and flowers and making wine, marmalades and jams and cakes and things.
So English.
To compete in. I would love to take part in something like that. I would enjoy it so much. So Stan wanted to enter the flower competition. I think Albert enters the vegetable competition. Maggie.
There's a cake competition, isn't there? And Len wins it, and he's really annoyed because his cake that he didn't actually bake, and it's this really frilly, looks like a lady's cake.
Yeah, Maggie bakes it.
Yeah,
and puts it in under his name.
No, Ray puts it in.
Oh, yeah.
Under Len's name for a joke. And because Len's such a
so macho,
so manly man of the world, he's like, I'm not going to collect a prize for that cake.
For a cake.
Yeah, that was really funny. But yeah, Emily.
The best bit was Emily.
Go on.
She was having to judge the wine, and they were trying to tell her that she should spit the wine out, and she was saying, "No, you can't. How can you taste it if you do?" But she was so sweet, and she couldn't pick one because she was saying, they all have their merits. I couldn't possibly pick between. It would be so sad to pick a winner from all such fantastic entries, but just she just got drunker and drunker and drunker.
Yeah.
And again,
drunk Emily Bishop is something that I never thought I'd see, but now I want to see more of.
And what an Emily thing to do, get drunk at a community summer fete trying to judge the wine entries.
What was the other? I'm sure there was another funny Emily moment in this lot. I'm just kind of scanning down my notes.
There was the bit where she was the photographer for
the
strippers. So that was in 1973, and she has to. So Ernest and she have a photography company, and she decides to go outside of her comfort zone to photograph some strippers for a club.
Isn't it? I can't remember what is it he had decided that his company wasn't going to associate with the strip club or something, and.
She does it without him knowing.
She does. For some reason, she goes and photographs these strippers.
And she just kind of sort of chats with them as she's taking these photos. And it's just Emily in a completely different world trying to be comfortable around these women who could not be more opposite to the way that she lives her life.
Yeah, doesn't one of them talk to her and say, have you ever considered taking this up yourself, Emily?
Yeah.
And that was Vicky the stripper, and Vicky is short for Doris. This is the joke in that episode. And this woman whose husband doesn't know that she even does this as a job. It was just really funny having Emily in a strip club, basically.
Yeah, and
funny
the manager,
having a strip club in Coronation Street. Back in the day.
And the manager was there sort of like going, look, get the next one out.
Yeah. Although they were a bit they were a bit more liberal about some of the things they would allow, because they had one episode which had Mavis reading a rude magazine, didn't they?
She was just in the front of the shot, just had a nude magazine. It
literally had a naked lady with her boobs out on the front cover, and Mavis was reading it. And just out of curiosity, wasn't she? And then she hides it away when Rita comes in. Brilliant having Mavis in the show, and the double act, the partnership of Mavis and Rita being established
in the cabin.
So early on. It felt like I was almost taken by surprise when the cabin appeared, and we'd spoken, like, again, when we'd researched it and we'd done our profiles or whatever, and we'd said, the cabin first opens in whenever it was 70. When was it? 73. But I felt surprised how early on in the show's history it was. It felt like we'd barely begun the saga of Coronation Street before Len opens the cabin, and then we have Rita and Mavis, these characters who hadn't been in the show before the 70s, now being quite important characters. Well, Rita had made one appearance in the 60s, hadn't she, in an episode that we hadn't seen. And the interesting thing about her character was that Barbara Knox, she was Barbara Mullaney, she was credited at this point. She was brought in to play a character called Mrs. Bates, she was a married woman, wasn't she? And she wasn't married.
Who are you talking about?
Rita.
Yeah. She
was involved with another guy, and they had a kid together, and
what?
And then Len was having secret affair with her or something, then when they originally didn't intend her to be the same Rita that Dennis had spent the night with in the 60s, but then they decided, well, let's say it is her, let's call her Rita, and then it turns out that this kid isn't actually hers, and it's a common law marriage, and then it kind of goes from there, and Rita was really unpopular when she with the other characters when she first came into it, wasn't she? Particularly Elsie, and I didn't realise how much of a Elsie alike Rita was supposed to be, because
it was very apparent when there's a scene with them in the club, and everybody's talking and chatting, and she's mentioning the fact that she knows Dennis, and Dennis is Elsie's son, and Elsie is just like, who's this hussy? And because what happens at the beginning, when Rita gets reintroduced in 1972, I think, who is it that was dating her?
Well, that's what I was saying. I think it was Len.
Len brings her in because she's got kicked out, and he's basically like, basically it was almost like Mary and Joseph, like wandering around trying to find room at the inn, and nobody would let them in apart from Maggie, and she only lets her in begrudgingly, but she makes a massive point of saying, I don't approve of anything that you're doing, you're a wanton.
Yeah, but she was like another Elsie, because there's been this simmering sexual tension between Len and Elsie all the way, basically since the start of the programme, that never, in the 60s, that never really went anywhere. And then had Len and Elsie had a fallout or something? I can't remember, but Rita was very much an Elsie replacement in her. She was bold, she was brassy, she was red-haired.
She was almost what
Elsie didn't like it,
in that she actually made a success out of being that kind of woman, whereas Elsie had just been crapped on for being a good time girl and going out with all the soldiers, and she ended up working in the shop. And then you've got Rita, who's like super glamorous and sings in a lounge. And
I love Rita singing. Yeah. She was a really good singer back in the day, wasn't she? I know they'll sometimes now wheel her out at Christmas and get her to lead the Rovers in a bit of a sing along. But she had a really good set of pipes in her back in the 1970s. She also
had a commanding stage presence.
She did. She was really confident.
She really
was brilliant.
Like the stage, and so when she was in the Capricorn Club and singing, Hey Big Spender and all this stuff, she really looked like she.
That was a funny scene, wasn't it? Because wasn't that the end of an episode where she kind of walks around the room in the Capricorn Club singing Hey Big Spender, and then she kind of drapes herself over one of the guys in the audience who's there with his wife, and then she ends up getting into a fight.
You brass face bitch, and then she just fights her. It's great.
We had a few bitches, didn't we?
Yeah, there was a scene where there were like 3 in a row.
Yeah, that was the scene with Elsie and Janet, wasn't it?
Because that's right.
That was around the time that Janet Reid had an affair with Alan Howard, who'd married Elsie at that point, And yeah, that episode was another YouTube one that we watched back in, I'm going to say 71. And the beginning of the episode is a showdown between Elsie and Janet, and they get 3 pictures in like the space of a minute. It's like, shocking.
I like this because this was Elsie getting her own back on the street and really showing that she was the top bitch.
Yes.
And nobody could get one over on her, because she confronts Janet about having an affair, and Janet's like going, it's all very well for you, you know, I don't have anyone to go back home to, I'm past it, I don't have any, basically not taking any responsibility for the fact that she was cheating and making out that Elsie should like share a man around. But basically Elsie tells her everyone in the Rovers knows that they're having this confrontation, and she doesn't want them to get the satisfaction of seeing them have this fight. So the pair of them go into the Rovers, and everyone's like holding their breath, expecting these two to start pulling their hair out. And then Elsie just like buys her a drink, and says, "This is your leaving drink. Now get your bags and get the hell out of here." And I just thought she was so dignified and so powerful that she basically managed to so thoroughly dominate her rival that she could take her cowed into the pub and buy her a drink to say, "You're going, this is your final drink, now get out."
That was brilliant. I love
that. Was
Elsie
what
Tanner.
Makes Elsie such a fantastic character.
Yeah, I can see now why everybody thought that she was, you know, the leading lady of Coronation Street back in the early days. But although saying that, I would say the character has taken a bit of a turn for the worse in her marriage to Alan Howard, which really hasn't worked for me, and I don't think it was supposed to. They were supposed to have had a bit of a tumultuous relationship. I mean, the fact that he had an affair with Janet was one thing, and he comes home drunk one day, doesn't he? And did you know that, I can't remember whether I told you at the time when we were watching it. No, I was going to say that he was originally supposed to be having an affair with Irma Ogden.
Oh no!
And that was the time when Sandra Gough did her disappearing act. So they had to quickly rewrite it and bring Janet Reid back. But yeah, the Elsie and Alan marriage, it really didn't work for me, and it just made me wish that Elsie and Steve had more time together, because I really felt a connection between those two.
Yeah, I did as well, but I think that Elsie and Alan felt like they were so wrong for each other that they were right, you know? Like they were both so flawed and had so many problems, but I think Alan let them get the better of him more than Elsie did. I just
felt it really brought the character down, having her tied to this pretty dull character.
He was a bit boring, but he had a nice voice. So they got married in 1970, and it was a bit of a weird episode.
Yeah, as much as I hate them getting together, I will always have the memories of their wedding episode, which had the most bizarre musical sequence, didn't it?
It was. I'll tell you what, if there was a way to sum up the 70s in one scene, it would be Alan Howard and Elsie Tanner wandering around a park with her wearing she was wearing a cowboy hat with flamenco music in the background. It
seemed like a very long scene
of just nothing, just
them walking around the gardens,
just walking around
to flamenco music.
Like whoever was in charge was just took too many drugs and couldn't think of anything else, and that was it, and knew that everyone else was going to be on drugs or drunk, so it wouldn't make any difference.
It was the 70s, wasn't
exactly.
it? Yeah.
So I thought that was the most 70s thing I've ever seen, and I really couldn't have. I think the 70s is one of these decades that doesn't have too much of a personality beyond like disco or whatever, and like Paisley. But that to me,
I don't know what they were thinking with that. But
even though it was very early in the 70s.
Yeah.
It was 1970.
We have mentioned other scenes in the past in the 60s where Coronation Street just decided let's have a scene set to music.
Let's just bugger off and forget doing this bit and just.
We don't need to write a script for this.
No.
Because they had they go to another stately home at one point, don't they? And then there's a load of harpsichord music going on in the background for no particular reason.
I have found a certain fondness for the sheer eccentricity of these musical interludes that they have.
Yeah, I don't. As much as I hate them these days,
in modern Corrie, I find
as watching
them very
ridiculous.
A
little snippet of history. It's just, it's utterly quaint.
Yeah.
And I was going to say the other funny musical thing was at the end of one of the wedding episodes. Was it Emily and Ernest's wedding?
And Emily's, when Ray and Vicky are in the park, and there's a load of creepy choir boy music when he's trying to sort of get her to go out with him. And then they have this...
Oh, I'd forgotten about that. I remember about the credits music at the end was being like different.
Fluty, yeah, that was from an album, wasn't it? Of like TV themes done
jazzed up
in flute.
Yeah, so that had the only time that's ever been used, that version you found on YouTube, didn't you? The full version.
It's so trippy.
It really, really is. But yeah, the strange choir boy music as Ray is going on the roundabouts with this Vicky girl. I don't even remember who she is now, but yeah, the incidental music, very, very odd.
So should we go through year by year and just
I think there's still lots of other bits to talk about. Okay. I'm enjoying kind of going back and forth. Now, we talked earlier about Janet, and that was another Janet Reed. That was another character that really didn't particularly work as much as I enjoyed Elsie's.
She's the one with the mullet.
No, that's Norma Ford, who also complete dud of a character. Janet was the one who we were just talking about that Elsie took for the drink and then said, "You're going." But then she came back, didn't she? Surprise married to Ken.
Yes!
And we weren't surprised because we knew it was going to happen. But at the time, Ken Barlow goes off to Scotland because Uncle Albert guilts him because he hasn't seen Peter and Susan for so long. So he goes up there and then he comes back down again and he's married to this woman that he's barely had any scenes with, or at least that we'd seen. And it was wrong for a multitude of reasons. There was no chemistry between them. They've already split up by where we are at the moment, haven't they? She was just...
So she becomes Janet Barlow.
Yeah. I don't know whether it was supposed to be, a bad pairing. But they did have a lot of other characters going, why are they married? Where did that come from?
They just did not... They did not... didn't really work. She tried to sort of... She tried to insert herself into Ken's life, and it felt like Ken didn't even really want her there, let alone everyone else. Like Albert Tatlock had a hard time accepting her, and she wanted to. He wanted to bring the twins back from Scotland so they could all live together, and she's like, nah.
Yeah. But this was I can't remember what year this happened in, but of course. But the last time we spoke about Ken on the 1965 or the second half of the 60s, he was married to Val, and I was talking then about having really grown to love Val Barlow, whereas in the early 60s she felt like a bit of a nothing character, but by January 1971 she was out of the programme.
I know, poor Val.
That was another black and white episode, wasn't it? That was in the middle of the colour strike.
Right. So that was quite dramatic. I really liked that.
I don't think it was. I didn't enjoy that. Oh. I thought it was disappointing, and I knew that when we started watching it, this is the episode where Val dies. I'll have a good death on Coronation Street, but in the end, it was more of a disappointing fizz. I would describe it.
Gosh.
Because Ken and her have decided to emigrate to Jamaica, haven't they?
I thought this was. I thought the fact that it was kind of a big old nothing death added to the tragedy of the fact that they were supposed to be moving to this new sort of chapter in their lives. They were supposed to go off to Jamaica, and they were having a going away party, and Val was like, "Oh, I've got to go and get ready. I haven't even had a shower." And so everybody's starting the party, and she's there and she's trying to get ready, and she's got wet hair, so she tries to dry her hair, and the hair doesn't work. So she tries to fix it with a screwdriver, and that doesn't really work. And so
I thought it was a potato peeler.
She poked it, and she gets electrocuted, and then she knocks the heater into a packing crate, and the whole thing catches on fire.
That sounds a lot more dramatic than it actually felt to me to watch. It just it didn't work. And when I think of Martha Longhurst's death, for example, which was super poignant, it doesn't stand up at all next to that. Even like Harry Hewitt, I felt was a bit more dramatic than Val, and and this is one of the early Corrie deaths that gets talked about, and I was just left disappointed by that.
Yeah,
it's a shame. Who else have we had to say goodbye to in the early
Jack Walker.
70s? Oh yeah, and he didn't even get an on-screen death, did he?
Well, he didn't. Yeah,
because the actor died off screen.
Yeah, that was really sad because I really grew quite fond of Jack. He was kind of like a big old granddad character, and he helped rein Annie in a bit. But like you say, I think he died.
He's left a real gap.
We've got a commemorative 1000th episode magazine somewhere, and that was really tragic because between the time that they made this magazine and the 1000th episode came out, he died, and he was in the 1000th episode, and they were sort of talking about how sad it was that he died so suddenly.
Yeah, but they don't mention it a whole lot. I mean, they obviously couldn't have his death on screen, but I think
we didn't get to see the episode.
We didn't get to see the episode after he died.
Annie being sad and sort of retreating.
She retires to the bedroom, doesn't she, for a little while. But now we're starting to see the period where she is, the sole proprietor of the Rover's Return, and it's her domain and hers alone. Although I suppose there's also Billy Walker who's on the scene. Billy Walker, I can't like him. What are you finding him interesting at all? He's just rubbed me up the wrong way. Him and Ray Langton.
Him and Ray, I
don't like them.
Ray, Len, and Billy, I feel are a bit of a cookie cutter group of characters, even though they are all different. See, I get them confused sometimes because they are just.
I find that Billy Walker, and again I'm just judging it on the episodes that I've seen, is fairly devoid of personality.
No, but he's a bit.
He's a bit of a. I mean, Ray Langton's a bit of a prank.
Hair.
The hair. Tell you what, the hair in the 90s, everybody's got a mullet, haven't they?
Oh yeah, even the women.
Ray's a bit of a joker, but he's just. He's got a bit of a undercurrent of not being a very nice kind of guy, and Billy Walker as well. He's like, I don't trust him, but Len,
he gets up to stuff like he's the one that sold the dodgy car to somebody.
Yeah, he was actually, and maybe you're not supposed to like him, but I don't enjoy not liking him. He's not a love to hate character. He's just I'm not interested when he comes on screen. But Len, and I think I was saying this when we were talking about the second half of the 60s. When I went into watching these early Coronation Street episodes, my mindset was, I don't like Len. I know what he cheats on Rita in the end. I don't usually like the manly man builder sort of archetypal Coronation Street characters. I'm not going to enjoy this Len Fairclough, but I can't help it. He's totally won me round in the second half of the 60s and early 70s. I really, really like Len. He's one of my favourite solid, reliable men characters.
Yeah, I mean, I think
he's a decent bloke.
I think they're all pretty similar, but I don't dislike any of them. I quite like Len. I think he does his best,
Yeah, I just find the relationship between him and Elsie utterly enthralling.
I know. I really think that they were the Ross and Rachel of Coronation Street.
Tell you who else, and I probably talked about this last time, but Jerry Booth. He's really grown on me, and in fact, I think I'm in the 60s because he had kind of two stints on the show, didn't he? And he gave that maudlin speech in Dennis Tanner's wedding in the end of the 60s, and then buggered off for like 3 years, and he's come back now in the 70s, and I've really grown to appreciate him a lot more, and he is very Ashley Peacock-ish, isn't he? He can stand up for himself when he needs to. He has to, have a bit of a drink beforehand, maybe. And he's not one of the lads, but he's still a builder, and he still goes to the pub and everything. But he's the sort of guy that I'd certainly want to be friends with.
He just seems like a reliable kind of a guy who life hasn't treated too well, but he still tries to do the good, decent thing, and he definitely tries. You can see it in the way he treats women. Like he expects.
Yeah, he treats them with respect.
Yeah, and him and Mavis.
Oh my gosh, what a pairing!
So sweet. I like the scene where they both go off to the
Italian restaurant
together, and
Brilliant.
they're both like, "What's cannelloni?" And I don't know.
That's so funny. That was a sign of the times, wasn't it? They don't know what that is.
He was so nervous and wanted to impress her, and how disappointed and disgusted he was with his wife, who kind of cheated on him and everything. And I just think like the other lads, like Billy, Len, and Ray. If a woman cheated on,
they're all womanisers.
They would probably be annoyed that they didn't get there first, you know, to be the one that cheated first. Whereas Jerry was like a Tyrone or a Chesney, except though he was never in it enough to really be boring. Whereas those other two characters, you could probably not have many arguments with people about calling them boring.
Tyrone's not boring. I like.
Well, I'm going to argue with you about
that. Jerry and Mavis. That was another relationship that I'd read about, and I think it might have even been when I was doing the Jerry Booth character profile back on the show, and I was like, oh, they had him paired off with Mavis first. That's weird. I didn't realise that. I wonder what that was like. But I'm loving it, and it's so tragic what happened to is it Graham Haberfield, the actor who played Jerry Booth, and how he ends up dying off screen in the late 70s. Tragically, at a young age, in his 30s, he has a stroke, I think, and the character's written out, and the direction that Mavis and Jerry were taking was so sweet, because it was these two, you know, middle-aged or younger than middle-aged characters that are both very shy, retiring, and nervous around each other, and to see them kind of to get together and develop this relationship, it's just I want to wrap them in cotton wool and say, I want to just get married and stay together forever, and
like Emma and Sebish.
Kind of.
Well, right.
I'm
only trying to think of something.
He's quite Craigish as well, isn't he? So maybe it's, but because they were, neither of them had any sort of confidence or self-belief or anything, but they had that in common. Yeah. It was just wonderful.
Like, it could have been them against the world, but they never got
the chance. And I have been wondering, watching this, how different would Mavis's character trajectory had been had they stayed together. And I do wonder, how long would they have kept Jerry Booth in the show? Would he have carried on, through to the 80s, to the 90s?
I know, it's difficult to say, isn't it? You don't know, but
because,
he obviously wanted to be in the,
Yeah, Mavis and Derek, classic Coronation Street couple that quite possibly would never have happened.
Yeah.
Because if ever two characters were made for each other, Mavis and Jerry were it. I've loved seeing young Mavis. She's still just so dithery and and pathetic, isn't she? And Rita making fun of her and everything. I liked the fact that one of the episodes that we saw was on the DVD was Mavis meeting Rita for the first time, and she had a job interview that she was hiccuping all the way through.
Oh, that's right, yeah. And it was quite funny because Rita kind of takes her under her wing a little bit, but teases her like a big sister almost. And the whole situation with the corner shop is just a bit odd.
Yeah, well, it's not even on a corner. What did you think of the old Kabin? Because if you think about the Kabin now, you think about it being, in a prominent position opposite the number 13 in Coronation Street, but back in the day it was down in Rosamond Street when that was a major Weatherfield road, but and the layout's all different. And I'd seen some clips and episodes of it set there on classic Coronation Street, but had you seen that set before?
No, and it's round the wrong way because the counter's on the left hand side of the screen.
Yeah.
And the doors on the right-hand side of the screen.
Well, they've also got the big section behind them, haven't they, where all the records and everything are.
Yes, it's a bit weird because it's like we're still in the era in the UK where the corner shop, Clegg's, is still I will serve you what you want. From behind the counter, and you tell me what you want to buy, and I'll get it for you and ring you up and everything. But the Kabin is still it's similar in that there's a lot of stuff behind the counter, but you can also look at the magazines and things, and you can also go around the back and have a cup of tea.
Look at the dirty mags.
And there's a lending library and things in there, which you would never have in a shop now.
No.
But it was really funny the way the situation was. Who was it that bought it? Len. and Ray was involved, and it was Audrey. No.
Didn't Ray want Deirdre to run it?
Deirdre and Rita were both in the offing to be the manageress, and they both got offered the job and the flat above by the men that they were dating. But then Rita wins out and she gets the flat, and Mavis comes and joins her behind the counter. But there's a really funny bit where these men who, for some reason, are buying magazines from what used to be a seemingly DIY shop.
Oh yeah, it was a shoe shop or something.
But now it's an corner
actual
shop with
newsagents.
But they keep coming in and asking, was it
Pig Fanciers Monthly or something like that?
And both Rita and Mavis keep selling them these magazines, and they keep opening them and going,
Where's my special supplement?
The extra bit? And they're like, there is no extra bit. That's what you get. And not getting that these guys are trying to buy porn without anybody knowing. And they both. And I think the last guy who comes in, and he realises he's not getting his extra. He's like, I think I'll just cancel my subscription. Thank you very much.
That was funny. I am enjoying.
I really like the fact that Mavis and Rita never worked it out, especially Rita, considering how worldly she is.
Yeah, she's great. They really hit the ground running with both those two characters, and how different Coronation Street could have been had Deirdre been the one that got the cabin.
Yeah, Deirdre's a fox.
I'm not going much on Deirdre so far. I don't think she's quite.
You can't deny she's a good-looking girl.
Oh yeah, I know. Yeah, but she's
I
just
think she's
being a secretary in the yard.
Yeah, but she's a dolly bird, isn't she? Like, she was. To me, it looks like they hired her for a bit of totty and underestimated how good Anne Kirkbride would be.
Yeah, they haven't given her enough to do yet.
No, not yet. But
But what it has at least, even though I've not been that impressed with Deirdre, it has at least given us the opportunity to meet Blanche for the first time, hasn't it? When was that, 74? Just on one of the recent episodes that we watched, and this was Maggie Jones in the role of Blanche, and incredible. It's like if you put a picture of what everybody thinks of when they think of Blanche, i.e., 2000s Blanche, and then you compare her to how Blanche was in the 70s, they look so dissimilar, don't they?
I know.
It's like you wouldn't recognise her if you hadn't been told, but to look at them together, it's like, oh yeah, that is what. And like it's like 50 years apart, or 40 or however. And obviously, old Lady Blanche is the Blanche that everybody loves. But I'm really glad we got to see what she was like back in the 70s as well. Being, what was it? She was a corset maker or something, wasn't she, in that episode? And that episode that was on the DVD was the first episode that Maggie Jones's version of Blanche was because of Patricia Kurtz playing her for a few episodes beforehand.
But she also takes over the Rovers a bit, doesn't she?
Oh yeah, she does.
And she does that really well.
Yeah, because currently Deirdre's going out with Billy, isn't she? And Annie's not enjoying the fact that she's having to be, because it was at Christmas, wasn't there? And Blanche ends up cooking this amazing Christmas lunch, and Annie her nose is put out of joint because nobody was
going to have her tea.
Yeah. But obviously nobody's good enough for her Billy, and she doesn't like having Blanche there along with her, and Blanche offers to look after the Rovers when Annie goes off somewhere for an episode, I can't remember, but yeah, that's all great. And speaking of the Rovers as well, the 1970s has also seen the reintroduction of Bette Lynch, who appeared in that one episode in 64, I'm gonna say, or it might be a few years out, and then was brought back in, I don't know whether it was 1970, 1971.
It's 1970, when Irma gets to go to the dogs, and then she and Dave Smith go to this weird African-themed club. African/Caribbean,
wasn't it? Yeah, that was weird. And Bette's there, so they reintroduced the character. That was another character, a bit like Rita, who was originally not going to be the same character that Julie Goodyear had played before, but then they decided, well,
might as well.
No, I think they wanted a character that Irma was going to bump into, and then when Julie Goodyear got the role, they said, "Oh, let's just make it be the person who you played back in the 60s." I'm not loving Bette at the moment. I don't think she's. I think as the years have gone on, she's grown into the role more. She's fun. It
certainly does seem to me that in the 70s, they decided, somebody sat down and went, we need a bit more totty. and they decided to sex Lucille up and bring in Deirdre and Bet as like the fancy.
Yeah, but I don't think that the character of Bet is really grabbing me. I think I end up enjoying Bet more as a landlady than as a barmaid.
She's still got all the bits that
she
made her appealing as a landlady.
She
still
has
got a good cheeky.
Yeah, she grows into it. And luckily her fashion improves over the course of the few years as well, because that awful brown floral print that
70s.
She was wearing at the beginning of the 70s was just hideous. I liked it when she and Lucille dressed up as a go-go girls.
I'm just trying to find that. There was this really bizarre bit where they got rid of... Annie went off to the cinema or something, and they quickly busted out the music and got... Lucille and Bet both had matching go-go girl outfits, and then they sort of jumped on the bar and danced around, and everybody just sort of sat there with their drinks going, hooray, we're having the best time ever. But we love go-go dancers.
Yeah, but then Annie came back early. They had to
quickly hide.
Yeah, that was weird.
It was really weird, because it's like, would you really be that interested in watching a lady that you know in real life? Like, I can understand the fantasy of like strippers and stuff, but if you know them in real life, doesn't it get awkward really fast? Not that go-go girls are strippers, but you know what I mean. It's the same thing of just watching a lady dance. Yeah, it's like holding a baby. After a while, it's like there's nothing new is happening. It's still the same thing, and I'm getting bored now. I'm going.
Yeah. Speaking of Lucille, she's also left now, hasn't she?
Yeah.
Because and that was a tragic story off screen as well, because of the
Jennifer
actress.
Moss had a very, very troubled time.
Yeah, and she ended up getting sacked in 1974, and that was the last we saw of her.
She ended up getting married 5 times in her life. She just had a terrible time.
I'm so glad that I've now been able to see the evolution of Lucille as a character from this gruffy little oik back in 1960 to a fun, nice...
She was, wasn't she? She was a
moral...
Sort of because she was the one that wanted to teach the kids how to read.
Yeah.
She stood up for herself. Not everyone... People didn't always agree, like, that what she said was correct, but she had the courage of her convictions.
Yeah, I really changed my opinion on Lucille over the course of this. I thought she was great, and I'm a bit gutted that she's left, and she was totally a character before I started watching these old episodes that I knew nothing about. She's not like got any famous scenes. If you pick lots of characters from Coronation Street, say, tell me a famous Ina scene, tell me a famous Len scene, tell me a famous Elsie scene, tell me a famous Lucille scene.
Not really.
And she still, even looking back now, I still wouldn't say she did. Maybe the go-go scene was one of them, but she was great. Was Lucille? I enjoyed her a lot. Who else was sort of new or left? I mean, Irma. That was a tragedy that we lost her, wasn't it? We spoke on the Patreon episode that we recorded recently about the episode where she pretends to be French, but for those of you that haven't watched that was a classic. Listen to that. I always say watch, I mean listen. Yeah, so she goes off to on a date with, I think it was Ray, wasn't it? And he tells this businessman that he's having a meeting with that he's bringing along his French girlfriend, so Irma has to pretend to be French, and she puts on quite a convincing French accent actually for someone who's got such a thick Scouse accent in real life. And then this guy shows up at the restaurant. Unbeknownst to Ray and Irma, he's brought along his actual French girlfriend who wants to speak with...
She's like, oh, can't we just speak in French? It would be so much easier. And Irma's like, oh no,
I will forget
my English. My English, if I speak in the French, I prefer to speak in the English.
Yeah, and don't they end up having a scrap at the end of it or something?
Oh, I love Irma.
Irma was so good.
She left in 1971.
She leaves at the end of 1971 and never returns. But again, so glad that I got to appreciate her character. We also new characters. I mean, there'd been some. Norma Ford was just nothing.
Don't know.
We said goodbye to Maggie, haven't we? Betty's
Maggie
sister.
Clegg.
And
she came back again.
She came back again for a bit, but I think I was going to say the same as the second half of the 60s. I didn't dislike her. She was a solid enough character, but she just didn't have that little spark. She didn't have that something that would make her go down as a classic.
I think of her the same way that you thought of Val initially, in that she's pleasant enough, but
pleasant is right.
Yeah. The major thing that happened when she left was obviously the Hopkins family came, and
I've really enjoyed that.
And they have taken over the corner shop, because that was Maggie's shop, and she's now moved with her husband to Zaire.
Yeah.
And so they came while she was getting married to sort of have a look around, and there's it's like a family of Welsh people.
The Hopkins are notorious for being, a real flash in the pan in Coronation Street, apart from Trisha, who lasts a little bit longer apparently, although interestingly Trisha has had pretty much nothing to do in the episodes that we've seen. It's been all about Granny Hopkins, really, hasn't it?
Yes.
And discovering the truth about Gordon Clegg really being Betty's son and not Maggie's son, as had been the established canon in the show up to that point. And I was really looking forward to seeing those scenes, but I felt a bit disappointed that the episodes that they chose to put on the DVD didn't really delve into it enough. They had, I think it was Granny going into the Rovers and brandishing this birth certificate.
Well, I like the way that they kind of they investigated, didn't they? And there was
they read this birth certificate saying that Gordon and his mother Elizabeth Preston. So they're like, "Ooh, I wonder who this Elizabeth Preston is."
So they go and they interrogate Minnie Caldwell, don't they? And they ask her if she recognises the name, and she's like, "Oh, I don't remember." And then she finally says, "Oh yeah, Betty and."
Yeah, and Becky and Maggie.
Yeah. And they work it out, and so
the actual fallout of this revelation being made public, we didn't get to see on the DVD, because the following episode it seems to have all sorted itself out. But the Hopkins, I am, for a family that was supposed to be boring and everybody hated them, and I think they've only got a couple of months left on the programme before most of them go. I'm really enjoying watching them, but I don't know how much of it is just to do with the fact that I absolutely adore their accents.
Yeah.
The Welsh accent. Every time Granny opens her mouth, it's like, oh, I love it. I love it. But I think she was, they wanted her to be a bit of an Ina Sharples-like character, especially considering that 1974 was the year that Vi Carson was off screen so much, and they wanted to have another battle axe. And I mean, they're big shoes to fill, aren't they?
Oh gosh, yeah.
But she does come across as a bit of a bitch, especially how much she enjoyed. Well, she revelled in revealing to Betty publicly, "I know your secret." But yeah, they're not as inconsequential as I'd been led to believe. But I might only see one or two more episodes with them on the 1975 disc, and then that'll be it. But I'm glad that we got to see a little bit of them, because they've been a family that we've talked about a bit on the podcast, and Betty's secret about being Gordon's mum. But I didn't have any reference point in my head. I think that's what I'm taking away from all these, even though characters like Norma Ford and Tommy Deakin and Audrey and Dickie Fleming haven't left much of an impression of me. At least now, when we read about them and talk about them and whatever, we'll know who they are.
Yeah, definitely.
Whereas before, they were literally just names on a page.
Well, while you've been talking about that, I found out some interesting gossip, because the Hopkins family, they weren't very popular, and I think that's why they got rid of them very early in 1975. So we haven't got very much longer to see them. But so Granny Hopkins, Megan Hopkins, was played by Jessie Evans, and her daughter Vera was played by Kathy Staff, who went on to be Nora Batty in Last of the Summer Wine, who's a very famous character. Let me just make sure that I've got that.
Yeah, that's right.
Because I used to watch Last of the Summer Wine.
No, I never did.
But interestingly, Kathy Staff thought that her character Vera would be the replacement for Ina.
Oh yeah.
But I don't know whether she's talking about the actual character or the actress who played Granny Hopkins, but it looked like she was going to fill that role instead. And then the quote from Kathy Staff is, unfortunately, it was Jessie Evans that they got in to play my mother-in-law, and I was in between her and the rest of the people in the street trying to keep the peace because she did some rather nasty things. So I think she's talking about the character there.
Yeah.
So she had aspirations to be the next Dina Sharples, I guess, and probably a bit disappointed when...
Yeah, she's not made a huge impression on me.
But obviously she went on to find success in Last of the Summer Wine, so...
Yeah. Who we also got to see the introduction of as minor characters in these episodes was Alec Gilroy, and this is when the Capricorn Club opened, which...
Oh, yeah.
And that was another... massive set that they used that I think must have only been on screen for like 6 months or so, if that, hardly any episodes. But he was the wheeler dealer, sort of slimy, charming,
the cigar puffing, sleazeball in charge.
Yeah, so that was really funny seeing an early version of him, and he doesn't become a regular until like the mid-80s, but that was quite cool. And also Ivy, and I'm gutted that Ivy, whatever she was, Tilsley, or she's got a bit of a weird history, has Ivy, because she came in and she was supposed to be married to someone, and then she comes back later and that person doesn't exist, and now she's married to Bert. But anyway, Ivy has been on the scene and she's totally glam, isn't she?
Oh yeah.
But we've not seen her very much. She's just in the background in a couple of scenes. She was at somebody's wedding and she was dolled up completely unlike the Ivy, the strict Catholic, scowling Ivy.
What happened?
Poison
to her?
Ivy.
Something awful.
So they obviously had one idea about this is what they wanted Ivy to be, and then they completely rewrite the character for like later in the 70s or early 80s. I don't know when the transformation happens, but I think there was a story in 73, 74 that we didn't get to see on the DVD where she's a lodger with Elsie maybe or somebody, and I'm a bit disappointed we didn't get to see that, because we've seen what glam Ivy looks like, but we didn't get to actually see her perform. Also, we've got to see a few appearances of Liz Dawn. Some of them this is before Vera Duckworth. She was like a background character in a few scenes, wasn't she? Do you remember that scene where the donkey was being...
Dolores the donkey,
and then these two rag and bone men were arguing over it. One was an Irish stereotype, Tommy Deacle, and one was a Welsh stereotype. It was that Dirty Dick. And it was come to the one that you love best, and Liz Dawn was in the crowd cheering this donkey on. But she had a few scenes. I think also Helen. I think Gail's supposed to have been in it so far, but we haven't seen her. I think the character is established in the show, but not on any of the discs. But also we got to see Jill Summers, who goes on to play Phyllis Pierce at the opening of the Capricorn Club, and she's a cleaner. Along with Hilda Ogden, isn't she? And I can't remember what the character's name was then. And we were watching that, and I was going, I think that's Jill Summers, and I had no idea that she was another character on Coronation Street before she goes on to play Phyllis. So that was a nice little moment there for me, because I do like a bit of Phyllis.
I was going to say, I'm just looking through the list of what happened in each episode. I really think that there was a big turning point between 1972 and 1973, because if you look back at what happened in 70 and 71, it still felt a bit quaint and old school Corrie. And then when it seems to be that when Rita came in and Elsie left, it felt like something changed in the show, and it became sort of felt a different atmosphere, well, that's how I feel.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't. Yeah,
like the stories that happened in the 70s. We had the Joe Donneli stuff and the Gypsy Saga and Irma going to the bar and things, and but then you had the black and white, going back to the black and white stuff, and Ernest and Emily's courting and the community centre thing, and like Emily going through her slides, Minnie and Ina trying
that was funny. Wasn't it?
Fall asleep and correcting
Emily.
Ina correcting her about where everything was and stuff.
Yeah.
But then it's really when Rita comes in as a full-time character, I think it starts to feel markedly different.
It feels like an early version of what Coronation Street goes on to be in the 80s.
Yeah, but you see what I mean? Like there was a transition of like very smooth transition where things got gradually more open and open from the 60s, but then this here in the early 70s there's definitely a shift. That's how I feel.
I think
only Bonfire,
quaint, not as quaint is a good way to describe it. Yeah, it's difficult to put your finger on exactly what it is, but they still had a couple of standalone episodes, like the pub pentathlon episode where Stan...
Oh, that was great, because everybody wanted Stan to be the champion
in the alcohol drinking
contest.
Because
there were lots of different competitions, I think, who was it? Len and Ray bet against him and then got him drunk the night before, so that on the day he had a hangover or like alcohol poisoning, more to the point, and he couldn't bear the thought of drinking anymore. But he managed to rally, because I think it was free beer, wasn't it? And won. Maybe. And there was also a funny bit because Ina was playing dominoes and she wins, and there's a funny quote, I forgot what it was, that I got out of that.
Oh yeah, you put it on Twitter, didn't you?
And they all have lovely sandwiches. Yes. I always get jealous when people have sandwiches, because I love sandwiches.
I'm just kind of skimming the other episodes and thinking anything there worth talking about. They had that night that in 1972 they had the Christmas 1940s show where they all... It was another one of these episodes where they all go to the community centre and some of them go on the stage and put on a little performance. And this one, the theme was the 1940s. So they have Jack Walker dressed as a soldier and putting on some comedy routine.
I think a lot of the things would have been apparent as impressions of people that we had no reference for.
Yeah, Emily is Carmen Miranda, and she's looking. Who that is. Yeah, she's looking around for fake bananas, but she has to use real ones or something from Maggie. And then she can't balance them because
they're too heavy and they'll fall over.
Rita's Marlene and Deirdre. Annie is Britannia, and she goes onto the stage ready to sing, and then they cut away from her. It is weird. We had Alf becoming mayor, which was...
I want to go back and just mention
go on.
In the 1970s, the bit when all the women refused to do the men any favours, and by that they mean have sex or do the laundry or the cooking and the cleaning and any other chore that needs doing, because they wanted to stop a football bus from driving through the street, and so all the men have to make a commune together at Len's house where they all do the chores and kind of like divvy up everything that the women are supposed to do. And I just thought that was really funny, because it was a really stereotypical idea of what women are expected to do in the house. But unfortunately, I would say not much has changed in what women are expected to do around the house compared to guys.
The Bonfire Night episode, which we watched on YouTube in 73, was quite interesting. That was another issuesy one, wasn't it? And who was it? Len was so passionately against he was
fireworks.
A massive killjoy,
but he was going, I don't like fireworks, they're dangerous,
reminded me of the Gypsy one, where the Gypsy Saga, where some of the characters were on one side and some were on the other side. Annie as well also doesn't think that fireworks should exist, or people shouldn't be able to put on their own firework party. But
then people still get riled up about fireworks now.
You do. 50 years later.
If you're on the Nextdoor app, every single Thursday between the hours of 6 and 10 p.m, you can guarantee there will be a thread there about how they hate the fireworks and they should all be illegal.
But yeah, the climax of that episode was when one of the kids
blows himself up.
Basically blows himself up when a spark from a firework hits another box of fireworks or something. Although I think that was also not a particularly spectacular stunt, because they had to rely on the characters describing what had happened. I think.
Well, they also didn't really have the technology to blow a small child up and make it look convincing.
Yeah. It's the 70s. You're glad that they didn't just say, come on, take one for the team and actually blow up the actor. They didn't have health and safety back in the day.
I wonder what terrorises children now, but when we were kids it was getting run over by a train or getting electrocuted by
don't go on the tracks.
A track, or blowing yourself up with a firework, or getting run over because you didn't look both ways when you crossed the road.
Cross code, yeah. The Majorca episodes we watched, they were quite fun, weren't they?
That was Corrie going on a jolly.
Yeah,
and it used to be they go to a stately home, and now they're a whole different country.
Yeah, I like the various romances that each of the characters got in those episodes. Like Mavis finds this Italian guy, doesn't she? That she has a kiss with. Oh, and speaking of, was it a Spanish guy? It must have been a Spanish guy. Because speaking of that. Well, go on.
No.
That then leads into one of the most recent episodes we watched, which included Malcolm Hebden's first appearance on Coronation Street as Carlos, the Spanish... I don't know what he was, but...
Spanish man.
And I wasn't expecting to see him. I didn't know that we would see his appearances on the DVD. So when he pops up in a scene, it was brilliant, because I've always wondered, what is Malcolm Hebden like as Carlos? Because we all know him as Norris now, and I knew that he was a Spanish character. What was he like? Well, don't stop your day job, Malcolm, because you can't do a Spanish accent. Terrible.
It was about the level of convincing Spanish accent that I can do, in which you just kind of like say everything in a weird way and then you expect it to the Spanish sounding.
Yeah, it was
I don't know.
Poor. It was really, really poor and weird and
it's like
and a bit
vaguely
culturally
European.
insensitive.
Yes.
If such a thing had existed back in 1970, it reminded me of the whole Apu saga.
Oh.
But yeah, I was so glad to see it, but that was pretty awful, because that was all with Jerry getting jealous because he went out with Mavis or something, didn't he?
Yeah, there was a bit of confusion, and they both all ended up at the
train
station, and Jerry was watching like some kind of noir hero with his trench coat and his cigarette in the rain or something, watching them walk off together. I don't know what actually happens to them, but
no, it was all right. What else have we had?
Oh, Eddie Yates arrives.
Oh yeah, we saw him on YouTube, didn't he? That was quite... I'm
1974.
looking forward to seeing more of
him. He tries to get off with Bet, and he's also bought a bunch of candles because he knows his friend is going to
cut the power
so that everybody has to buy candles. And he's trying to get Bet away from the Rovers before that happens, but she keeps dilly-dathering, and then they're all there when the lights go on.
Yeah, that was quite cool. And they have a nice Christmas sing-along at the end,
they do,
with somebody on the piano.
Yeah. You didn't mention, in 1973, two quite interesting things happened, I thought. First of all, the women lose a competition or a bet or something, and they have to put on a drag show. I think they were hoping the men would have to put on a drag show, but no, it's them. And so you have, was it... Bet and
Betty and Laurel and Hardy.
Yeah.
Norma Ford is Ken Dodd.
We had Danny LaRue. I've forgotten who that was.
Yeah.
That was really funny. I did.
Was it Rita?
Yeah, maybe. I think
remember.
because Danny LaRue was a cross-dresser, so she just went as a woman.
Yeah,
and everyone was going,
right.
Well, that's not fair. And Rita was that kind of woman back in the day who would use any clause she could to get out to make herself look better than everybody else.
Yeah, I didn't. That episode didn't really.
And then there was also sponsored charity swim, where they all had to swim as many lengths as possible. And Mavis was the dark horse of the race because she did 18 lengths, didn't she? And that was also the same episode what I've been waiting for and wondering if we would ever get to see.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Go on.
I wasn't expecting it.
No, I know.
It's one of the one when the cameraman bumps into Pat Phoenix.
It hits her on the head as she's going through the door from
the snug to the main bit.
It's really it's a really famous blooper from the show, and she gets to the bar and sort of stands to one side and looks, and she gives them this saucy look like, you hit me on the head, you mucked up.
That was I wasn't expecting to see it, and because there's been so many episodes that didn't make the cut, obviously, on the DVD, and the fact that this one
we got to see it in the wild.
Yeah. and it's one of those moments where, like, seconds before you go, ooh, I think this is the bit where such and such happens. And there's been a few moments like that. There's like, oh, this is this bit. But yeah, that was great.
I absolutely love seeing that because you could see Pat Phoenix's personality just like shine through, and how she was a bit similar to Elsie in that they were both fiery and you wouldn't want to cross them.
Is it a coincidence that not long after that Pat Phoenix leaves the show and says that she's not coming back anymore? Fortunately, she does. There's technical hitches. We mentioned them before on the last one, but honestly, over 50% of the episodes the boom drops into the shot, and I'm not joking. I'd say it's more like 75%. You're more likely to see the boom in an episode than not.
Yeah, and we both say boom.
Yeah, we have a competition between us to see who can say boom the first. It's hilarious, just the fact that they don't care.
And
I wonder whether people back in the day minded.
I don't think they did.
It's just quaint to us, isn't it? Yeah, so we make it a competition, and the number of lines that are fluffed as well.
I know.
They just leave them in.
Or like talk over, say one of the characters will say the line too soon, and then we'll stop and then wait for the other person to say their line and then say exactly the same thing that they already said.
Considering they had all this rehearsal time, it is compared
weird
to these days when that never happens.
It is weird because I know they don't do many. I don't think they do many takes now.
No,
do they? But
as
it felt a bit like you're supposed to make all your mistakes and then do it perfectly, whereas now it's like the other way around almost.
Yeah,
but I don't know.
But no, it's really funny the cheap production values and so.
I think that
it
adds
all adds to the
charm.
definitely. So I think that's I think we've reached an ending point for our critique of the first half of the 1970s.
Okay, I think we have
something that started off fairly negative, and it certainly for me isn't living up to the 60s when there were so many episodes. It's like, that's this episode, that's this famous scene, whereas this, I'm not getting that, but it certainly has had its fantastic moments.
I just want to mention one more thing do you say fantastic moments? When they went to Woburn Abbey in 1973 and like Hilda and Stan wandering around and Hilda just going, "Oh, this is the most famous room in the world, Stan," and him going, "They should be able to sell beer in here." Looking for the
funny.
beer everywhere, and there was weird harpsichord music and Annie just walking around like she owns the place. And
it did felt like it was a bit of a retread of the Tatton
I know,
Park
but I still
episode.
liked it. I thought it was great because you still had the Duke of Bradford turn up.
Yeah.
And
the other thing that was weird there, isn't that where Ina meets an old school friend from like the 1919 or something like this, and they don't make anything of it. It's just like, I know you, I went to school with you 50 years ago, and how are you doing anyway, let's move on.
And they were like, "Oh, do you know so-and-so were maiden name? Oh yeah, I remember her, yeah, she's now married name. Oh, interesting. Well, I used to know maiden name and now she's married name."
I thought there may be some revelation about Ina's past that might get revealed there, but alas no. What I did like as well that we haven't mentioned, that Handel side that came into a couple of episodes, that old guy who seems to be a bit sweet on Minnie.
Yeah,
and then
he disappeared.
I think he comes back again, but it was sad because I'm a sucker for Minnie Caldwell crying, whether it's at weddings or in this instance because he mentions Martha, doesn't he? He's like, who's that other person
that used to hang around with?
Yeah, and like, Minnie just burst into tears.
Oh, bless her.
And it's similar on the Joe Donneli stuff as well when
she was being held hostage with Bobby.
Yeah.
Poor lovely Minnie.
I don't think that Minnie has been as funny in these episodes as she was in the early ones, but she's getting on a bit now. But I think she's great. I love her.
And there wasn't there. No, I thought something else and I forgot what it was.
Don't worry, it's fine. So anyway, that is it. That is our opinions on the first half of 1970s Corrie. It's all right, and I'm really glad that I'm filling in the blanks in the Coronation Street knowledge.
There were some really funny, memorable, great, dramatic, wonderful scenes and great characters.
Yeah, and pretty much everything that, there's some characters that you can rely on 100% to, give a fantastic performance, like Hilda Ogden, for example.
Yes.
And
there's a reason why they're icons, isn't there?
Yeah, totally. I'm just,
What?
I just really, really love being able to say that I'm watching it and I'm getting a sense that although we're not seeing everything and there's vast swathes of episodes and stories that we're not getting any exposure to at all, just the fact that I'm feeling like I understand Corrie's history and the flow and the pacing of these stories a lot more, and knowing what fits where. Because if you were to have asked me before, when does the serving hatch thing happen? When does the cabin open? And I wouldn't have an idea really.
No, I know.
And now I kind of can fit the timeline in my head.
Yeah.
With lots of bits taken out.
For me, it's things like the corner shop, like Dev's now, knowing where that came from and who used to be in there, and I always felt like I kind of didn't have a clue. But now I feel like I really have a solid grasp on knowing.
That was Maggie Clegg before that, exactly, and Irma before that. Can I just say that when I know we said we finished, but I feel like I need to fight for David Barlow's corner here. But he ends up getting killed in the Australian car crash, and sadly that episode wasn't on the DVD when they find out.
Was that in this bit of the show?
Yeah, that was in 1970. And then Irma comes back and they don't really mention it. And the next time we see Irma, she's off
trying to get a
leg over with Dave Smith, isn't she?
She was, basically her entire family was destroyed in one horrible car accident.
Yeah, and it doesn't seem to affect her. And it would have been really
tragic, because I think, so when it actually happened...
I was going to say there were a few moments. It wasn't there. Doesn't she go to someone's wedding and she hears wedding music and she gets a bit teary? But
well, it would have been interesting to have watched the episode, because I think they find out that there was a car crash and Dave is dead. David Barlow is dead, and then Hilda goes to Australia, and they don't realise that the child has also. The child dies the next day, so she leaves to go to Australia, and then they find out after that the kids died as well, and I just can't imagine how tragic that would have been on the show.
I know. I wish we could have seen that episode.
Unless that was rubbish.
That also, because that's where Dave Smith, the bookie, gives the money to Stan to pay for Hilda's ticket or something, doesn't he? And so Stan now owes him, and then Irma comes back and she starts dating Dave, which is weird because he's so much older than her, and it all gets a bit...
Yeah, and then Stan wins £500 and gets excited, and him and Hilda start waxing lyrical about what they could do with the money, and then they remember that they have to
pay back their debts. Yeah, tragic. Right, we need to stop reading because we're going to find other things we want to talk about. But Evan, I hope you really enjoyed that. I enjoyed discussing it. I was worried at the beginning that we were just going to end up slagging it off, but there's an awful lot to love about these episodes.
We never completely uncritical.
No, there were just more in this set where I felt that episode didn't need to be on it.
You don't need to explain it again.
But yeah, lots to love.
I thought really good, really great characters. I love watching the development of Stan and Hilda as iconic duo on the street. And
the early days of some
introduction
characters
of,
that go on to be
Blanche,
massive.
Rita,
Deirdre, Mavis,
and watching also them all go off on holiday. I really like that too, or the girls' holiday together.
That was fun. Right, I hope you enjoyed this, everybody. If you want to send us some feedback, do please let us know. If you're also watching some of the old episodes, maybe at the same time as us, write in, tell us what you think. Did you agree or disagree? Any different things stand out to you? We're at conversationstreet@gmail.com if you want to send us an email, or you can tweet us at conversationstreet, or various other methods. I'm sure you can find out. We're going to be cracking on now with the second half of the 70s. Maybe get a few in this weekend, and I guess we'll be back. I mean, it's going to be end of June, early July, probably, when we get to talk about that
the
next.
End of the 70s.
Yeah, the end of the 70s, and we'll look forward to that. So until next time on the podcast, ta-ra for now.
Bye.